Hi, I hope you're having a great day. Today we'll be talking about how to create a strong SaMD culture in order to get products to market safe and effectively as possible. This is a topic that I'm particularly passionate about. A little bit about me. My name is Yujan Tresta, CTO co-founder of Analytics. I've got 10 years professional software development experience in the medtech industry. I also have an MD, and I'm also a subject matter expert in AI and ML. My company, Analytics, we are a software development and regulatory consulting agency. We have completed over 40 projects in the space, all of which have a software component to them, many of which have machine learning components. We've also helped our clients with the regulatory consulting matters, and several of these projects have either been cleared by the FDA or are currently in process and clearance with FDA. Here are some of our happy clients. And here's our leadership team. Collectively, we have several decades of experience between us, and we bring a broad interdisciplinary skill set to the table. We're supported by a team of 16 talented software engineers and also regulatory experts. Here are some of our happy customers that we've worked with over the years. This presentation is for you if you fall in any of these categories. So if you're interested in building a software medical device company from scratch, I'm sure you'll find some information here that will be helpful. Perhaps you're adding a machine learning or a SaMD component to an existing hardware medical device. Perhaps you already got a prototype and you want to get that FDA cleared, and also build a company necessary to support that clearance and also any post-clearance activities. Perhaps you're interested in getting SaMD to market and you want to build a new department within your company in order to execute on more software projects. Or perhaps you're interested in trying to attract more high quality talent to your medtech company, and you want to focus on culture, and you want to show them that culture matters to you. It definitely matters to them. This presentation is not for you, unfortunately, if your product is not a software as a medical device. Keep in mind, though, that you can have a hardware device on the market, and you can add a software add-on to that. This is typically how I recommend doing any sort of new machine learning applications potentially can be done in this way. The nice thing with this approach is that typically SaMD software-only medical devices are less burdensome to get past FDA. For example, the Apple Watch itself, the hardware itself, is not considered a medical device, but the software that will analyze EKG and tell you if you have cardiac arrhythmia or whatnot, that is considered a software-only medical device. And this is not for you if you're just wanting to check off a box and you don't really care about making a safe and effective product. And quite frankly, I don't want to come off as too harsh here, but quite frankly, this mindset needs to be changed if you want to stay within this industry. This industry, everyone should strive to making the safest and most effective product possible. It's the bad actors that lead to more stronger, stringent guidelines from the FDA, and it just makes it more expensive for all of us. So honestly, if you are not in it for the right reasons, I ask that you probably find another industry. Um, it's also not for you if you're not interested in creating a culture of quality. This is really the mindset you need. It's not just a checkbox you tick off now and you call it a day. This is an ongoing process, and it's really the culture that will lead you to success in the long term. And finally, if your RAQA department is not open to using the newest tools, it may be difficult to get the cost and speed advantages that we'll be talking about. It may just be a little bit more difficult to implement some of these improvements to really get that 10x improvement to the current standard of care. So if you're in the SaMD, if you're interested about SaMD right now, you may be interested about AI and machine learning. You know that that's a very constantly changing space, and it's critical to retain the best talent, hire the best talent, and work on the culture in order to keep up with the changes and keep up with your competition. And having a good SAMD culture will empower you to do that. A strong SAMD culture empowers you to respond quickly to market changes while creating safe and effective medical devices, and while being able to attract and retain the best staff. A weak SAMD culture does the opposite. It's much slower to execute. It's much more frustrating for your team to execute, which leads to your competitors getting an advantage, which leads to your team having poor morale and therefore having higher turnover, which leads to a lot of problems. Especially for a software product, having engineer turnover is extremely harmful, and all this leads to lost revenue. So here's some common cultural pitfalls. One of the common ones I've seen are siloed teams, where like I've heard the phrase used in some of my previous projects where something has failed validation. What that typically means is that the engineering team, product team built something that didn't solve the clinical user needs. So it's really difficult. It's much more difficult to build the right thing versus building it right. In order to build the right thing, you need to have a cross-disciplinary team, and there need to be as many touch points as possible between engineering, clinical, product, DevOps. All these teams need to come together and understand how the other teams think. So ideally, the clinical team will understand how the engineering team thinks. They'll be products that are simple to execute, but also have high clinical value. Vice versa, the engineering team should know how the clinical team thinks, so they'll be able to understand requirements and be able to ask questions at the right time. Um, One other problem I've seen is just taking existing processes at face value. I've fallen into this trap myself, where I've assumed, especially when I was first starting out, as was coming from a mainly software background, not knowing how the software how it what it takes to get it through FDA. I assumed that all the procedures that my company was following was gospel, like it came from the straight from the FDA itself, and that's not necessarily the case. That usually the procedures are interpretations of the standards and the regulations, and these interpretations may have been created, best intentioned, of course, but created by people who aren't necessarily practicing software engineers. So this can lead to headwinds throughout the entire process that can slow down your path to market. Not using templates that are specifically designed for SAMD. You can release a medical device, software medical device, using hardware-oriented templates, although you'll be doing a lot of redlining and you'll be doing a lot of fitting square pegs into round holes. Um, for example, here, uh, uh, hardware devices, you typically have to validate one embodiment of this device, and then you need to manufacture many copies of that device. Unfortunately, it's not practical to have an exact atomic replica of that device, so you need to have other processes in place in the tools and process validation for manufacturing your device. And those validations will serve as the proof that what you're manufacturing is indeed what you tested. Software, on the other hand, doesn't have the same problem. You can manufacture an exact bit-by-bit replica of that device. It's the same one that you used in clinical validation. And with tools like Docker, you can replicate even more. You can replicate the exact execution environment as well. And because of this, and because of the much higher level of certainty there, you may not necessarily need all the tools and process validation and perhaps other processes as well, but you may not necessarily need that for a software-only product. So it's important to build procedures that are geared towards software. Um, Also, not using or using too much of the waterfall approach. There's a common misconception that because it's a medical device, it needs to be done in a waterfall fashion. Uh, while it is true that you're not going to be doing a nightly release, most likely because you do need to verify and validate. You can't be iterating that quickly, but you can still be agile on the inside, and perhaps you can decouple your verification validation cycle from your feature set, and it will allow you to have an agile core surrounded by a waterfall shell. Um, and There's this famous FDA diagram that's been duplicated many times, and it talks about verification, validation, design inputs, and all the different stages. And unfortunately, it looks like a waterfall. And this is unfortunate because it doesn't need to be strictly waterfall. Another problem I've seen is when SOPs are too difficult to find. Sometimes the engineering team and the regulatory team are using different tools. So you can have like sometimes I've seen that software engineers don't even know where the software development plan is, because it's stored in a document control system somewhere where no one knows what this is something that they access once a year, and when they go to access it, they figure out their password expired, and then they try to change that, and like it results in something that people don't use day to day, and results in poor compliance and worse outcomes. Better if everyone uses the same tool, or at least done so in a way that is more frequently used day to day. Here's some best practices that you can potentially incorporate into your organization that would help overcome some of these problems. Breaking down silos, as I've mentioned before, more frequent touch points between the clinical team and the software engineering team. They'll begin to understand each other and begin to interpolate each other when they're not in the same room together. Results in a much better outcome for everybody. If you have a subject matter expert in your company that is both a clinical expert and a technical expert, that person will be invaluable to you in helping foster this new culture of frequent collaboration and creating procedures around that to enable that at the most important touch points. For example, here on several machine learning projects that I've helped with, um, the machine learning team can be chasing a dice score, but a higher dice score doesn't necessarily mean a better clinical model. Sometimes a clinical model with a lower dice score, but is able to spare a blood vessel or do some other clinically nuanced thing, is actually better than seeking a high dice score. Or sometimes like the high dice score is because you have errors in the original data. Without the feedback loop, um, you're not going to build the most optimal product. Also, you want to apply templates specifically tuned to SaMD. If you have someone in your organization that's well versed in software medical device, and, then this individual will be very well capable of writing the templates and knowing what to filter out from hardware speak, or at least make it least burdensome as possible while still fulfilling regulations. That's the kind of person we want to have to build these templates, because most of the time the people executing the templates won't necessarily be able to improve them, and they'll just have to absorb that extra burden. And once you create templates, it's hard to change them. So it's better to get it right the first time if you can. Try to use unified tooling. So if possible, and this may be very difficult to do, possible the same tool used by the regulatory team should be the same tool that's also used by the engineering team day to day. This is very difficult to do because typically regulatory documentation are stored in Word documents, but engineers operate more on Markdown files and wikis. But there are tools. There are tools these days that bridge the gap a lot better between programmers and non-programmers both can use the same tool. Um, and with that, that silo is going to be broken down, and the engineers are more likely to be compliant with the tools, and the regulatory consultants are less likely to spend their time having to chase down documents and procedures. And they'll free their time up for doing other things. And also try to understand the why and really build a culture around understanding the why. Because if your team doesn't understand why a procedure was built, how will they know how to improve that procedure? Also, be agile where it counts. We mentioned before, if you have an expert in your organization who knows 6304 and who's applied it to other projects, and especially in an agile manner, that person can be extremely invaluable to your team into building out the procedures that would work well for your organization. So already mentioned some of these, but here's some potential solutions to create a culture or an effective SaMD culture. You can ask your software engineers to do it. And there's some advantages to this. If you ask the person executing the procedure to write the procedure, you know that's going to work well. Your engineers will have a sense of ownership over the procedure, and it will be the most customized to your existing software development practices. On the flip side, though, and also from my experience, it's not the most enjoyable thing for software engineers to do is to write procedures. It may not even been part of their job description, perhaps. And this can lead to engineer burnout and leads to higher engineer turnover, which we've discussed earlier can be extremely damaging for a software project. Also, there's just the opportunity cost of engineers being taken off of feature work. So we would rather have them work on software features than work on regulatory documentation. And also the regulations and standards are often written in an abstract manner so that they can withstand the test of time better. So rather than mention Git or even version control, 6304 and another regulation standards too mention uh, configuration management instead. Which if you told an engineer configuration management, they would look at you crazy. But if you told them version control and requirements.txt file like that would resonate a lot better with them. Um, but for someone who's done it for the first time, myself included, it's very hard to pull down those abstract terms into concrete day-to-day terms. And the other thing you risk is it may result in the tooling and the processes made that are difficult for non-engineers to use. That was certainly the case when we built up our processes. Version one of our MedTech OS was all done in Git, which is great for engineers and has several other advantages too, but it was very difficult for our non-engineers teammates to use that. And overall led to a slowdown of the process. Um, you could also choose to repurpose your existing SOPs. Perhaps you have them already. Perhaps you're a hardware company, you already have existing SOPs. Some advantages of this is it would definitely reduce the risk that your new SOPs won't fit into your existing QMS because, and also it also would be nice for your RAQA team because they're already familiar with the SOPs. However, um, these existing SOPs may be overly burdensome for SaMD because they're not written specifically for SaMD, and your engineers may have to struggle to figure out how to satisfy hardware concepts that don't quite fit into software. Like shelf life, for example, is one of them that may really that's really thrown me for a loop in how that bridges over to software. But it does actually bridge over reasonably well. You just have to think about it the right way. Um, and so I've seen um, these headwinds slow down software projects maybe up to by order of five x or potentially even more, depending on how burdensome these SOPs are. Um, Alternatively, you can hire an external regulatory consultant. This could be a cost-effective way to get started, and the consultant will know exactly what regulations, standards, and guidance documents that you'll need to follow. And it'll also be able to help you to prepare the submission. But in my experience, um, could be less well versed in software engineering. Like typically, they're not going to be practicing software engineers, so they'll be unable to provide you with concrete feedback and concrete examples about how you can meet a certain requirement or the closest or the fastest path to fulfilling a verification test, for example. Whereas having someone on your team that's well versed in both engineering and regulatory would be able to provide that customized level of feedback down to the level of code to, for example, take credit for risk control measures you already have instead of having to create new ones. And this could really help your dev process, especially if you've already created your software product already, and you're looking to get it cleared. Um, okay, so quick blurb about our services. We help medical device manufacturers create strong SaMD culture, effectively help you bring your products to market as fast and safely as possible. Um, so here's a recipe that we put together that has worked well for us. There's several ways to put together a SaMD culture. We're not saying our method is the best, but we're putting this in front of you here so that you can get an idea of how we do it, so you can see if this is something that you can apply internally to your own organization in order to do this. And we've found this procedure to work very well for our clients. So if our client has not had software built already, we can help them write it. Our engineers are well versed in the relevant rules and regulations to build compliant software from the beginning. If our client already has software, perhaps they have a prototype, our engineers can work with their engineers to uh, um, to bring that prototype into the standards that will be necessary to get it FDA cleared. And typically, this does not need a complete rewrite. I've heard this time and time and again. It's a common misconception, like that's that you need to rewrite the software if you didn't develop from design controls in the beginning. That is not true, and that could cost you a bunch of money if you've been told that. Um, and after this step, once the software's been written, then we move on to the rapid first 510K. So we have built a suite of automated tools and also semi-automated tooling and templates and processes that are geared and laser focused to SAMD. And this allows us to create this allows us to prepare a 510K submission in 4 months. And I think more importantly, which commonly gets overlooked here, is that your first submission is just your first submission. But know that that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you're thinking about creating a successful company, then your first submission should be one of many. And I think where uh, having tooling like this really helps is subsequent submissions can take a fraction of the time and they can be done much faster. You'll have a lot more subsequent submissions than you will have the first one. So in our particular case, with our tools, we can get the second and subsequent 510Ks in done about 2 months or less. Um, in my experience with the headwinds I've seen, like I talked about earlier about having a poor SAMD culture, those can multiply this timeline I've seen by an order of 5x. So having the culture down right can really help you speed the market, beat the competition in the market, stay in the market, and adapt to changes to the regulatory landscape, technical landscape, and clinical landscape as well. So it's not a said and done thing once you get the first one out. The third step is we can take the outputs of the Fast 510K and then we can integrate that. If you already have an existing QMS, we can integrate that into your QMS. Or if you don't have a QMS, we can help you set one up. And we also can help you hire your own team that is necessary to execute the functions of your QMS, essentially execute your SaMD culture. Um, and then fourth, we can guide your team through a second 510K. This time, your team is going to be in the driver's seat. The goal here is to fill in any knowledge gaps your team may have, such that subsequent regulatory submissions can be done all on their own. And then finally, uh, we'll still be here to help with any questions you have, and also to maintain your system and keep up with the ever-changing rules and regulations and landscapes. So you know that you always be compliant. Um, and this is really important to do. Like I'm saying before, it's not a one and done thing. It's not a sprint. It is a long marathon. And it can be difficult to know how to incorporate changes that come from new requirements. And with our tooling, it is designed in a way to be easily allow you to incorporate new changes as they come, new requirements. We can import like a requirement library that we curate from a new cybersecurity requirement, for example, and then we can insert that into your quality management system. And now you've just saved your RAQ department weeks of effort to combine all those documents together. Uh, and other cool things that are possible, or like if there's a change to the standard, like the standards consistently change over time. ISO 2012 versus 2016 versus 2023, and rather than having everyone having to read that, we can read it for you and create a diff of how can you modify MedTech OS or your QMS. How can you modify that in order to um, be compliant with these new rules? So yeah, I genuinely hope that this has been helpful to you and that this gives you a roadmap to help your organization to create a strong SAMD culture that will enable you to beat the competition in the market, make more revenue, grow a 10x team, maintain a 10x team, and make the best impact possible to patients. Um, and I can only offer you our services if you're currently looking for some of these services. If you're currently trying to make a SAMD culture, my team and I can definitely help you do that. And also, please reach out to our website. Um, yeah, thanks a lot for your time.